Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our regular council meeting to order on at 6 p.m. I've had two requests. One is either to provide the score of the hockey game every 5 minutes or adjourn the meeting in 17 minutes. So I'm sorry that I can't do either this evening. But I do have two requests from colleagues that please keep your cheers very quiet. We'd like, if possible, to have it as a mystery when we leave this evening. Okay, there we go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening, not only because of the hockey game, but it's one of the longest and nicest days of the year as well in our community. And I'm Mayor McNeil Smith. I want to acknowledge colleague councillors, Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Garnett, Councillor Novick, Councillor O'Keefe, and Councillor Rintoul. Good evening to staff and good evening to you, the members of the public, and to any who may be watching the live webcast and have it up against the game. I'd first like to respectfully acknowledge that we're having a gathering this evening is in the territory of the Wisenburg nations, the Sayote Nation, the Sartlam Nation, the Pakwichan Nation, the Sycam Nation, the Malahat Nation, and we express our gratitude for their stewardship of these lands and waters for millennia, that is thousands of years, and we reflect and appreciate the importance of working together with the Wisenburg people on stewardship of these lands and waters today, but for future generations also. In turning to approval of the agenda, we have only one additional item of correspondence since the agenda was published last Thursday. That is a letter from Brenda, and apologies on the last name, Hot Loma. And with that, I would ask for a mover and seconder that our agenda be approved as amended. Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novick. All in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. We're next turning to public participation opportunities. And due to legislative requirements for certain items on the agenda, we do have more than one public participation period this evening. In just a moment, we'll have our regular general public participation period where members of the public can speak to any item on the agenda or another municipal matter. However, we have two special public participation periods. One is we are presenting the 2023 Town of Sidney Annual Report, and it is a statutory requirement that we have a special public participation period for that. And then third, we have a public hearing for bylaw number 2275, our zoning bylaw, and that is a separate public participation as well. So in a moment, I'll ask anyone to come forward that would like to address council and not speak to either the annual report or the zoning bylaw. And so first time, would anyone like to come forward, please? Sorry? I don't choose the order. It's first come, first serve. So good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I'm Denny Warner, Executive Director from the Mary Winspear Centre. And before I speak to the Sidney Transit Hub, I just wanted to acknowledge that I believe this is CAO Randy Humble's last council meeting. On behalf of our organization, I just want to say thank you at this time for all of your work on behalf of the community. Yeah. All right. So our board had a brief discussion about this proposed Sidney Transit Hub at our board meeting on June 18th. We did have one of our board members actually who attended the committee of the whole meeting that night as well. And I did appreciate the heads up call from Jen Clarier letting us know that the project was on the agenda for that evening. But unfortunately, we didn't have time ahead of the committee of the whole meeting to discuss and develop some thoughts about it. So that's why I'm here tonight. It was helpful for us, though, to listen to BC Transit's presentation and then all of the subsequent questions that came from council. So that did inform a lot of our response. And I wanted to start by saying that we are actually in favor of the Sidney Transit Hub and are generally comfortable with the proposed location. Having it across the street from the center provides easy access for patrons and staff, and it offers obviously the necessary easy access to the highway for the buses. I, however, have a front row seat from my office window to that parking lot and all of the other activities that happen outside there, so I feel like potentially I am in better place to comment on some of that than maybe even the people that did I don't remember when the parking study was done last, but I can see most of the time that lot is quite full. And I am concerned, and I think some of the board too, when we had it discussed at our board meeting, that we are concerned about the removal of the majority of those parking spaces. Especially when we have large events, that space is used to capacity. In fact, it overflows into the Save-On lot and well beyond sometimes. Given that we're already trading some of our parking spaces in the lot for the EV vehicle, the charging, and parking is obviously a hot topic of conversation in this community, that overall loss of parking is a concern for us. My front row seat also allows me to view the traffic situation, which at certain times of the day is already quite backed up. I'm not sure if there was maybe some tweaking of the lights or something that happened there, but it does seem like the traffic really does back up there now in a way that I never noticed before. And I would say that our main concern is that patrons have safe and intuitive ingress and egress to and from the center. And I was going to try and explain some of my concerns, which I realize will be difficult without having had slide 22 in front of you, which people spend a lot of time on at the committee of the whole meeting. But so I'll do my best. But if we're going to block the access, so from the roundabout area where people can't cross over like they do to go left onto the highway. So the only access from that will be out and to the right. And then those people are going to have to go probably turning left, because most of our patrons, I would say, I mean, this isn't a formal study, but based on kind of where our ticket sales happen, are either from North Saanich or Victoria, the number of people that drive anyway. So most of them are turning left onto Beacon. And so then if they have to then go along Bevan and then turn left along the liquor store and then that strange little laneway along Coast Capital and then try and cross that traffic over there, including what will then be buses as well going there, and then get into the left lane to turn left, I can just see all kinds of problems happening with that. And then all the people that are at that laneway that's coming the easement where the community safety building is, that left-hand turn that goes down that crazy little place alongside the liquor store, that's further beyond where those people have to merge either to go left or right from there. So they're going to be staying there potentially for a long time, which I don't think is ideal when you've got emergency vehicles that are trying to get out. I don't know if you could picture any of that, but anyway, it can be challenging to imagine the headaches that future users will experience when you're looking at something that seems workable on paper, sometimes realizing it is a whole different animal. I just want to say that I don't believe planners of the past had any idea that the McDonald's and dollar store access would become the butt of so many jokes due to its lack of function. And so we just want to ensure that whatever situation is proposed, that it's one that works. And while we hope in time people will opt to use transit, we just know that the demographics of this area and the lack of service throughout North Saanich, that it will be some time before our patrons get out of their cars. I will acknowledge that we were a little surprised that this preferred concept had reached this approval stage without any previous stakeholder engagement, but we do look forward to participating in future to identify more workable solutions for vehicle traffic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming forward along with board colleagues this evening. We appreciate the input and your attending. I'll call for a second time if there's anyone wishing to come forward, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dennis Carlsen here on behalf of the Sidney Community Association. Also with me tonight is Sarah Waddington. Some of you may know Sarah. She's one of the tenants that's subject to being displaced out of a rental building that's slated for redevelopment. There's also a letter from the Sidney Community Association that's in your agenda package. We're here tonight talking about the authority under Bill 16 for municipalities to be able to create a tenant protection bylaw. As you are probably aware, Sidney's tenant assistance policy, as good as it is, only kicks in the event of a rezoning application. And also, staff have acknowledged that the proposed RM6R zoning will not prevent tenants from being removed, nor from buildings potentially being demolished. Bill 16 now gives municipalities the authority to require tenant assistance without the necessity of a rezoning application. Staff have indicated that they will be bringing a report to council in the coming months. We definitely appreciate that staff have a lot on their plate. However, given the urgency of the need to protect tenants in the remaining rental properties in Sidney, we are requesting that council make the tenant protection bylaw a priority. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Sarah for some other comments.
Good evening. So on top of that, the proposed rental zoning protects zoning, but not the buildings on these sites or those who live in them, which Dennis has described. So on top of creating tenant protection policies or bylaws that protect tenants from the impacts of redevelopment, we also have to protect our existing rental stock. In BC, for every unit created, 4 units are lost. And these numbers are not sustainable. To support the housing targets we need to achieve, a phased system to protect against declines in housing stock is needed. And I'll send you some information on this, but New Westminster has a policy called the rental replacement policy. So any rental buildings planned for demolition, sorry, I'm not very good at public speaking. Any rental buildings planned for demolition must have a permitted development plan in place for demolition to proceed. And this is one way that we could guarantee rental stock is replaced rather than having vacant lots. So today in Sidney, nothing prevents the demolition of rental stock, which I've gone over, and with the increases in density brought forth by Bill 44, speculative developments and demolition pose a direct threat to existing rental housing and renters who live in these buildings. So please consider, on top of creating a robust tenant protection bylaw, a rental replacement policy. So the affordable and attainable housing policies the rental zoning is based on offer more comprehensive approaches to protecting rentals and renters. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward this evening. We appreciate it. I'll call for a last time if there's anyone wishing to come forward on any general items on the agenda this evening. Seeing none, I'll close the general public participation period and turn to the special public participation period for the 2023 Town of Sidney Annual Report. Is there anyone wishing to come forward to speak to the annual report this evening? I'll call for a second time if there's anyone wishing to come forward. And for a third time, seeing none, we will close that special public participation period. And as we see on the agenda, that does come up as an item for discussion later on the agenda. The third is the public hearing that we're having this evening with regards to our zoning bylaw. And as per statutory procedure, I have a brief statement to read, and then we'll turn to Mr. Humble. Public hearings are a statutory requirement under the Local Government Act for official community plan and zoning amendment applications or bylaw changes. They are an opportunity for any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw changes to be heard. Council welcomes input from citizens, and those who wish to speak will be given reasonable opportunity to be heard. We request that all speakers and those listening remain respectful at all times in order to allow people to feel comfortable expressing their views and so all views may be heard. Council's role during the public hearing is to listen to all speakers and have an open mind. Council members will not answer questions during the public hearing itself and will not challenge or debate with speakers. Written submissions have been circulated to council and will not be read aloud. After the public hearing has been closed, council will consider the matter later on the agenda under the bylaws section. It is the next item this evening. Council must not receive any additional information other than to clarify issues raised at the public hearing with staff. Council will then deliberate on the matter and make a decision. I would now like to ask Mr. Humble, our CAO, to please read the public hearing notice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the notice of public hearing for zoning bylaw number 2275, and I'll read the notice that was sent out. Notice is hereby given that the Council of the Town of Sidney will hold a public hearing in respect of bylaw number 2275, being the proposed new zoning bylaw for the Town of Sidney. The purpose of bylaw number 2275 is to regulate land use and built form on all properties within the Town of Sidney. This bylaw would replace the current zoning bylaw number 2015, incorporate policy directions from the recently adopted official community plan bylaw number 2240, and fulfill the Town of Sidney's obligations under recent provincial legislation, specifically Bill 44, the Housing Statutes Amendment Act 2023. All lands within the Town of Sidney would be subject to this bylaw. The public hearing will be held on Monday, June 24th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers at the Town Hall. Members of the public wishing to provide input may attend the meeting in person and speak to council, attend virtually, submit written comments until 4 p.m. on Monday, June 24th, 2024. Written submissions will be accepted at the public hearing. All correspondence submitted will form part of the public record and may be published in a meeting agenda. Copies of the proposed bylaw and background documentation can be viewed at Sidney Town Hall during normal working hours from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, excluding statutory holidays, from June 11th to June 24, 2024. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Humble, and I want to acknowledge that we have two pieces of written correspondence. One was included in the agenda package that was published last Thursday, and one I acknowledged this evening during approval of the agenda. With that, I'll now open the public hearing, and for those wishing to speak, please come forward if you can provide your name, the municipality you reside in, and provide us your views. And for a first time, would anyone wish to come forward? I'll call for a second time if there's anyone wishing to come forward. Please come forward. Yeah, just you get a red light to make it live there.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak at all, but I think the council here deserves congratulations on coming through this whole process. And I'm proud of how we've got to it. Well, I wouldn't say we have necessarily perfection, but I'm really quite happy with having gone through that. You've gone through the process and delivered this in the time and on board with the provincial government. So congratulations on doing that. And I'll put on my Canada hat here only to promote Canada Day coming up. And Sydney is full of proud Canadians, as they're not here at this this council meeting. They're watching the hockey game, so we have plenty to be proud of. Thank you.
Just before you leave, we'll save it to the end for you to provide your name and municipality you reside in, even though many of us.
Okay, Murray Wisenburg from Sidney.
Thank you.
Thank you
for coming forward this evening. I'll call for a second time. Anyone wishing to come forward? And for a third time, seeing no further speakers, I will close the public hearing. Thank you. And we are next turning to that item under bylaws. This is under 5A, bylaw number 2275, our new zoning bylaw, to reflect the new official community plan and new provincial housing legislation. Our process is for members of the public and council. We've received a letter, it's in the agenda package, from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure approving these bylaw changes, and so the process for council now is to provide third reading in which we won't have deliberation, and then if that passes, to move forward to adoption, and we can deliberate at that time. I would seek a mover for third reading. Moved by Councillor Duncan, seconded by Councillor Novick.
If I may make a single word change to the wording of the recommendation, to replace upon with, because we do have the receipt. No.
No. Thanks for bringing attention to that. It was partially my reason for mentioning that we've already received. At the time we published the letter, we didn't have that letter. That letter was received on Friday. So we don't have to make reference to the Modi letter in our resolution.
Okay.
Because it was received on Friday. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
So we do have it moved and seconded. All in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries. We'd look for a motion to adopt. Moved by Councillor Novick, seconded by Councillor Duncan. And I'll turn to deliberation. I'll turn first to the mover and seconder, Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have a lot to say. I think most of commentary on the zoning bylaw has been said. I'd like to congratulate staff for working so hard to make the deadlines on this and make the changes that council had requested during the course of our deliberations. I think it is a good bylaw. It addresses most of what the town needs. It's probably not perfect. I don't think any piece of legislation ever is. But I think that that staff and council have done a good job in meeting not only the needs of the town, but also the requirements stipulated by the provincial government in the interim, which was a bit of a bit of a surprise during the process, but I think staff rose to the occasion. So I'm happy supporting this bylaw as it's been presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. Councillor Duncan.
I concur with Councillor Novak. I know there was still discussion of some points and how this will, affect existing developments in the community, and of course, we still don't have, necessarily rentals right that we're in the place where everybody feels happy with it. But we know that there's more provincial legislation that we can work on before the next update to the official community plan. We will have another official community plan review in 2025. And potentially bylaw changes that could flow from that. And of course, we have provincial government and federal government elections coming up shortly, which may have, more enabling legislation. So it's a work in progress, and I'm quite happy with where we're at, and hopefully the things that we still see there are things that will flow through in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Although I'm not in agreement with some aspects of the new zoning bylaw, I think we've done a reasonable job in the amount of time we had available. I think it's a Herculean task for staff to pull in all the changes from the OCP, read all the new legislation, and translate that for us. So, and we have to get this in place by June 30th. So overall, I think it's reasonable. And in supporting adoption, some of the rationale or the things I'm thinking about are the fact that we're going to be able to take another look at things when we redo our OCP next year, and then a subsequent zoning bylaw after that. And I think that's important because I think that although we did a pretty good job at a community engagement, it's hard for an individual to go through a zoning bylaw. I found it challenging ourselves and then factor in the new legislation. And so I think what we'll find is that there might be people who come forward, or we may realize that there's things that we've done that weren't anticipated. So I think I'll also be aiming to keep an open mind as we move forward in implementing this in terms of potential amendments. If we come across special circumstances or unintended consequences, I think it's good to have an open mind on those things. Finally, I just want to comment on some of the feedback that we got throughout the process. And some of it was not necessarily related directly to the zoning bylaw, but whenever we talk about development, people come in and give comments on a number of things. Traffic is one, and the comments about the, concern about additional traffic due to more development. And I think that's good to be mindful of. It's not a reason for us to curtail development, but I think it's reasonable for us to be thinking of that as we move forward in terms of how we mitigate the impacts of that additional traffic, and how we talked tonight about getting in and out of the Mary Mary Winspear Center. I mean, it's already an issue in the north end of Sidney, all that traffic funneling down Resthaven. So I just want the community to know, yes, heard the message about traffic, and I'll look forward to having more discussion on that. And then the other thing is about the tenants assistance policy and the tenant protection policy, which was brought up tonight and at previous meetings. And although we've changed the zoning bylaw to allow for rental-only areas, there's still not that right of protection for clients. And I know that the legislation now provides for that, and I understand staff will be looking at that Bill 16 in more detail and coming forward with us for a proposal. So for me as a council member, I know that there's a lot of things to get done, but that's something that I feel strongly that we need to focus some attention on, you know, as soon as staff has the opportunity to review that legislation. So just want the public to know, thank you for your efforts in bringing forward that particular issue. And for me anyways, and I think for many colleagues, it is an important thing, and I think it's something we will spend some more attention on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Duck.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As my colleagues have pointed out, we have gone through a pretty good process, I think, and have been reminded of different aspects that we have to continue to look at. And I think I want to remind my colleagues and the public listening and attending that much more than in past, we have two very dynamic documents now. Both the OCP and the zoning bylaw will not be documents that stand for 10 years or 15 years as past documents have, but will be, as staff have indicated, will be reviewed within a year. So this gives us much more patience with what can be done with our two documents and getting them right, as one of my colleagues pointed out. They're not, it's not a perfect document, but we'll get there. And I think that's the opportunity we have for us, and staff have indicated we'll be working on a continual basis, much less than in past where it stood as a document that was sort of set in stone for 7 to 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I would like to thank the public, the people that came to speak to us, the people that wrote emails, the people that took the time to come to the information session, the 5 different open houses, to provide feedback. It's always important when I was quite thrilled to see how many people made the effort in the attempt to become informed and get the information that actually was factual. And it did make a big difference, I think, in the community. I also, and I know the mayor will probably do the same, want a special thank you to staff, in particular Mr. Newcomb, Ms. Verhagen, Ms. Gilmar, and Ms. Fletcher. Through most of this process, we were short-staffed, 1 person in our planning department, and those 4 individuals went way overboard in providing an amazing amount of effort and pivoting when necessary as the provincial government decided to change the game plan for us. And so I just want to appreciate and reach out and let them know that that's what they've accomplished is pretty impressive. And I was here on 3 of the open houses and saw the care and attention that our staff took to speak to individuals with their questions, and took as much time as they needed. So it was really impressive to see how our staff was so engaged with the community. As far as the overall process go, I won't speak to what other people have spoken. I watched the announcement when Bill 44 first came out, and my first response when I heard it and saw all of it all was, where's the green space? Where's the trees? And there's been many communications from the public regarding this. And I think staff has done an excellent job of trying to nuance green space within allowable areas where they could. In particular, the multi-unit residential, neighborhood residential, the adoption of the large canopy tree root zone, I think is something that's important as we battle to keep trees in our community when developments happen, and try to keep the boulevard trees. So I think there's things they've done in there that really will help us in the long run and keep our community a lot healthier and a lot more livable. But the overall process, I've been part of this now for 5.5 years, and the public turnout for this was really impressive, especially the time of year. And I was pleasantly surprised by how many people made the effort, and very thankful that it did happen that way. I think, as others have said before, we'll be looking at things next year, but for the overall tenor of the document and what staff had to work with, in the timing and their resources. I think they've done a really good job, and very commendable. So I hope the community's happy with what we have, and I hope it'll work going forward. But there are abilities to tweak it next year as we look back. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll be brief, but I just wanted to comment that, you know, our new OCP is now 2 years old, essentially. And so this process around the zoning bylaw was clearly a priority to this council. And I say that because it's fair to residents to have this sense of clarity with respect to their properties. It's fair to developers, you know, moving forward in terms of what their expectations can be on projects and working with the town within the revised zoning bylaw. So it has been, you know, a long time coming, and I think that gave staff the opportunity to develop a pretty thorough document, given we've acknowledged some curveballs from the province that staff pivoted very well to. And in my mind, the process that was followed came down mainly to the planning department and their aptitude, their approach with answering questions and being available to speak and meet with residents and development community as well. And so I think this would have been a lot tougher ride for all of us had Ms. Verhagen and Mr. Newcomb and the planning staff, you know, not been so approachable as a part of that process. So I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but you know, appreciation to them for their very personal approach to this undertaking. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. And some of my remarks may be a little repetitive, but I think it's important that we do acknowledge staff and the work that was done, and in particular providing the engagement opportunities that were provided. And as been commented by councillors, we did have other council members, we did have I think an excellent turnout. And I think part of the evidence of that is changes were made. A draft bylaw, zoning bylaw was presented to council on April 15th. We had input that very first night from residents from the development community. And we continued to have input, and changes were made because of public input, because of deliberations and decisions by council. So I think it was an excellent process, and again, thanks staff for having that process in place for the community involvement and for changes to be made through the process. As has also been acknowledged, this was a large project. It was going to be a large project, or it was already a large project, in that we had done a comprehensive review of the official community plan. And what I continue to remark about the official community plan, because I think it was the community's wishes, it was their desire when we went through the official community plan process, is that while development and land use development is a prime topic during OCP reviews and that sort of thing, we were really looking to maintain and improve a complete community, a balanced community, that we could balance green space, environmentally sensitive areas, culture, our local economy, our three economic districts, and to find the right balance in our official community plan. And so then the task was, just with with the comprehensive review of the official community plan, was to bring the policy and the land use, the policy and the guidelines in the official community plan, and have the zoning bylaw be consistent with that, with the intent of the official community plan, as the community understands or appreciates the official community plan. So of course it became the project became larger with the introduction of Bill 44 legislation last fall, which brought the most significant change we could imagine to single and two-family land use designation in our community. And again, we've had great input from the community, a lot of concern expressed, but we have within the direction that the province has mandated for municipalities of a certain size, including Sidney, to do this. I think we have been true to our OCP in terms of wanting to continue to have a complete and balanced community, as expressed through the OCP and through the zoning bylaw. And lastly, I'd just like to touch on, as Councillor O'Keefe did, while it's not a specific topic in terms of a replacement policy. Thank you for bringing that forward this evening. I wanted to acknowledge that council and staff brought forward on April 15th, and that was the time that council learned, when it was presented in public at that meeting, that we were pursuing the RM6 R zone. And I don't know if quite frankly, if other municipalities are doing that, but I think that alone, in doing that in the zoning bylaw, signaled to the community that we had been listening through the OCP process, or have been listening to the community at large in terms of the concern about having rental accommodation in our community, not only for workforce, not only for seniors, but having that choice, having that tenure available in our community. And it's a challenge, given that we're dealing with private property and what the constraints are through Provincial's legislation, our OCP, and our zoning bylaw. So I hope we've signaled very strongly through this zoning bylaw that rental accommodation is very important, and we've created this RM zone. Do we stop there? No, we don't. And we were reminded from the speakers this evening that, in fact, the province has provided the additional piece of legislation, Bill 16, and that will take some work. But it is considerate for members of the public, those who spoke and others who have interest. I met with another resident late last week who's living in the area, and it is a priority. Staff have acknowledged it as a priority within the zoning bylaw, and we're acknowledging it as a priority for our community. I'll leave my remarks there and thank all colleagues for their input this evening, or comments this evening. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? And that does carry unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to adoption of minutes. We have two sets of minutes which we can adopt together, those from our regular council meeting of June the 10th and those from our special council meeting of June 17th. I would look for a mover and seconder that they be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Dux, seconded by Councillor Novick. Any corrections? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. None were opposed. We're turning to rise and report from in-camera minutes, and this is for information only. And at the June 17th in-camera meeting, Council made the following two motions to rise and report. The first, that Council continues to support efforts to seek restoration of the Sidney to Anacortes ferry service from the Sidney Ferry Terminal prior to the year 2030. And second, that staff report back at a regular council meeting when either an agreement to restore service is concluded or staff recommends that other options be considered. With that, I will turn to the Mayor's report, and I have two items this evening. One is published in the agenda, and that's the CRD Board highlights. There was two important items that the CRD Board has advanced. There's all sorts of detail and provided within the reports and links to meetings and minutes and reports and so on. We don't need a motion to receive the CRD Board highlights, but I open it to colleagues if there's any comment or questions, which I would do my best to answer. Seeing none, Councillor Rintoul. Thank you.
Do you recall, Mayor, with respect to the extension that the CRD was offered from the Minister of Environment? I think initially that biosolids management strategy was meant to be submitted June 18th. It references an extension, but what's the period of the extension, do you know?
Yeah, so the CRD Board made a request through the chair to the Minister for and this was going back at least a couple of months ago, to request an extension to the implementation, or sorry, to the submission of the CRD's biosolids management plan. And we didn't receive a response to very close until our last meeting when we were considering approving the plan for submission to the province. And but the province did indicate that they were willing to provide an extension. And the board did consider that. Staff made a recommendation to the board. And there were 6 conditions attached to the extension. And staff felt that staff and the board concurred that those conditions would prove very challenging to meet while seeking the extension. There was another aspect that the CRD board staff were waiting for, and that was, and I'm forgetting the acronym now, but there is, it's provincial, provincial regulations, OMAR, I'm sorry. And the province had originally signaled that those were going to, an update to those regulations, which could impact your biosolids management policy, would be made public in January of this year. Right up until May and until a meeting that our board chair and CRD CAO had and staff had with the minister, that there was no indication what the timeline was for that to be submitted, and so we couldn't wait. And if we had taken the extension, we wouldn't necessarily have had that information to consider in the biosolids management plan. So thank you for the question. Seeing no further discussion, I will turn to the next item, and it's with great pleasure that I take a few moments to acknowledge, as our first speaker this evening, Jenny Warner, acknowledged that Mr. Randy Humble is attending his last council meeting after 24 years of service with the town of Sidney. We didn't attempt to count how many meetings that is, Mr. Humble, but it is a lot. And both council and staff and some invited community leaders held a reception, a celebration for Mr. Humble last Friday evening. Council gave a gift to Mr. Humble in thanks and appreciation, and the staff gave a gift in appreciation. But I wanted to acknowledge the remarkable accomplishments Mr. Humble has had during his 24-year career, starting in the planning department, becoming director of development services, and then being our chief administrative officer for the past 12 years. I want to personally comment and thank publicly Randy Humble for the great working relationship that he and I have had. It's been a remarkable experience for myself. I feel I've grown as a person and understand municipal affairs much better, working through the process together. And I want to acknowledge that Mr. Humble's remarkable leadership, exceptional leadership, has led to an extremely remarkable team at the town of Sidney. And we have a remarkable senior management team who are themselves leaders in their department. And when you have an exceptional leader at the top and you have exceptional leaders of departments, it trickles down. And organizational excellence has something Mr. Humble and other staff brought to our strategic planning process. So we weren't just talking about what developments we wanted to do. We actually talked many years ago about the importance of organizational excellence. And Sidney, town of Sidney has a great reputation, I think, on the South Island and throughout the province, for those who are aware. And I think it's a testament to the leadership that we have at the top of the organization and through the very strong team that Mr. Humble leaves for us to continue our work in the community. The second is Mr. Humble as a public face to external organizations, whether it's the Victoria Airport Authority or particular Ministry of Transportation, whether it's the many community organizations. We heard the expression of appreciation from the Mary Winspear Centre, one of our largest community organizations, and we appreciate hearing that in public. And we have several other very key organizations. And those relationships, partnerships that Mr. Humble has helped build, and of course other team members have helped build as well, have gone a long, long way to seeing our community evolve in many good ways. I remember during my first inaugural address, I spoke to what it was like over the time period that my wife and daughter and I had lived, and the changes, the positive changes that had happened in our community, over the previous 20 years. In 2000, there was no Mary Winspear Centre. In 2005, there was no Shaw Ocean Discovery Centre. And I could go on in terms of, whether it's the widened sidewalks in our community, whether it's the waterfront walkway, the fishing pier, and other amenities. So all of those positive ways of the community evolving requires exceptional leadership, and we thank Mr. Humble for that. The third is Mr. Humble's support to, on behalf of all of the staff, support to mayor and council. A council is a policy body, and we have a lot of varied business that comes before us, but we really depend on the information that is provided to us from staff. And so through Mr. Humble, we thank you, but we also thank staff for the great information that we receive in staff reports and the great engagement processes, as we acknowledged earlier, that when we're setting significant community plans or other projects that we have. So again, Mr. Humble, thank you, and we all wish you the very best in your retirement with your family. And with that, I'll turn it to you for a few.
Maybe just indulge me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for those kind words. I'll be very, very brief. I just want to say that as I do conclude my final council meeting as the Chief Administrative Officer, that I certainly want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mayor and Council for your unwavering support and collaboration over these past years, and certainly what you said about the staff and the management team and the employees right through the organization. I owe them a debt of gratitude as well, because I couldn't do this job without their unwavering support as well. So to the wonderful community of Sidney, this is an exceptional community. So I thank the community as well for their level of trust and engagement and their participatory nature. They've provided so much to this community in terms of advancing all the wonderful things that have happened throughout the years. So it's been an honor and privilege to serve the community and the entire organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and let us bring our hands together to show our appreciation for it. With that, we'll return to the hockey score. We'll return to council reports, and I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, who has a verbal report.
Thanks. See, now I feel really anticlimactic. So the June 19th meeting last week of the Regional Water Commission, we had 3 small things to update on. Of course, there was a large main break in Calgary, as many people probably saw in the news, and so we had a brief discussion to see if people were getting, comments and questions from their constituents about that. And I hadn't, but I know people in, Saanich, Victoria, the municipalities with much older infrastructure, some of those water pipes are 100 years old. They were certainly getting questions. But the CRD, we've had kind of practice with large breaks up here on the peninsula. Not that large because we don't have any pipes that large, but last year there was a main break, and one of the great things about the CRD is that unlike a lot of municipalities, particularly the further east you go, is that we have a lot of internal capacity to do work that other municipalities need contractors for. And so when something breaks, we're able to get staff on there right away. And we also have a lot of spare parts because we have smaller things too, smaller pipes as well. We have a lot of spare parts in place, and we don't necessarily need to wait for things to be ordered from San Francisco the way they did in Calgary. And so, while obviously we still have vulnerabilities, Main 4 would be the largest one going up to the peninsula that we're still vulnerable on, and we have earthquake hardening, in the pipeline for that one, and that's a big project, and other twinning, putting attention into making sure there's redundancies and bits put in so that if there's a break in one spot, there can be backflow using existing ones to go around, is something that we look into. So we're in a good position, and we didn't have a lot of people who felt that we were in as much of a vulnerability as they were, which is good to hear. We have a UV treatment plant upgrade project that is coming up. We put that out to tender. We were unable to get any bids from a single company that was able to actually do the work because it's very specialized, but several of the contractors who were going to bid on it actually pooled the work, so we got one proposal from a number of companies working together. And they were able to bring the cost down to within the budget. So it's going to be a $7 million project. And that's the kind of specialist stuff that we do need contractors for. I even asked a question about that, if there's any we can bring in, but it's, you know, so infrequent that we replace a UV treatment and control panel project that we don't have that capacity, and hopefully we'll never need it. We had one movement of money from the capital plan, so $180,000 that was going to the leach ecological restoration work has been diverted to a high priority culvert repair over in the rest of the watershed. But so there's been no increase to our budget, but budget has had to be moved from one spot to another to get something fixed. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I'll turn to colleagues. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any update on the DCC proposal?
That was a good question. Yeah, that had gone out to public comment. I believe it's just closed. We had one person come and talk about that in public comment, that the way CRD generally does kind of public feedback for that, because it's a self-selection survey where it's anonymized, that they were worried that we would be getting comments from people who were actually had vested interests, like the development community, that would be then anonymized and look like the public had certain opinions. And so we didn't get the results of that feedback yet, so we have no ability to know whether that was the sort of thing that would happen, but it is a self-selection process that feedback has been working under, and we know that the development community has been having, you know, meetings with the CRD, and there will be some ongoing, and the suggestion was that those be made open to the public so that the public could actually hear what developers were saying. And staff were going to look into that because they felt they couldn't see a reason why that would not be allowed, and that might help give people, I guess, some context on what kind of things developers are actually saying and what the CRD is saying to them in an open format, because it doesn't need to be closed, and that would really be helpful. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. That concludes council reports. We're now turning to committee reports, and the first under 12A is Committee of the Whole, our meeting of June 17th. We have the minutes on our agenda. We don't require a motion to receive, but I'll ask if there's any corrections. Seeing none, I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, who was chair of the meeting, to take us through the first recommendation, please. Or the one recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. Committee moved, or committee recommended, and I so move, that the proposed off-street Sidney Transport Hub option at Bevan Avenue and 7th Street be approved in principle.
Moved by Councillor O'Keefe, seconded by Councillor Duck. I'll turn to the mover and seconder first.
I still have reservations on this. You know, we heard from the Mary Winspear Center, not necessarily that they're opposed to a hub, and I agree with them. I think we need a hub, and probably that's you know, when I think about it, the best location in terms of someplace on the highway. However, I think we still need to do some additional community engagement on this. I would like to see that before I approve this in principle, just because we heard from Mary Winspear Center a few things tonight that may impact them. I don't know how it's going to impact the Dairy Queen or the liquor store or Save On Foods or the other businesses along Bevan. Not that I would disagree with putting the hub there, but I think we need to know what the issues are that we're going to have to deal with, or the considerations, so that we can go to transit and say, yes, we approve this in principle, but here's some things that have to be considered. And I don't feel like I have enough information on those other things yet. So, so I wouldn't support this as it's written unless we do some additional community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Duck.
I do support this moving forward in principle, and that's the important aspect of this motion, is that this was a proposal brought to us by BC Transit for a transit hub, and they've gone over a series of different options, and I think this is the most viable at this point. Staff agree. They've looked at it. Certainly we've got some challenges, and they're well aware of them in terms of parking and traffic flow, but I think it's important to recognize that we need to start moving in this direction in order to put a transit hub in Sydney,
It would be one of the only ones off highway, which is important for transit exchange, as staff have pointed out. And I think that for our residents that are traveling to and from Victoria as well as northbound to the ferry, this will make a great interchange to provide that opportunity and move people from cars to buses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole, and I have Councillor Duncan afterwards.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll thank the board members from the Mary Winspear Center for being here this evening, along with the Executive Director, Denny Warner. And I was in attendance at the Memorial Park Society board meeting when the board discussed this, and I think Denny certainly portrayed well the general support for this around the MPS board table, and I think articulated some observations today that perhaps could be addressed as this progress advances. I was a little mystified, I think, just at the response from BC Transit on engagement, because Councillor O'Keefe's made the comment about concern that we haven't seen the process engage at this point from some of the neighboring businesses, for example. And as I recall, and I'll certainly welcome Ms. Clary to clarify if I interpreted this correctly, but that BC Transit want to focus their resources on a location that is supported by local government, and then go out and fine-tune that location through a consultation process. And so I'll yield to Ms. Clary if my interpretation of that was accurate.
Ms. Clary, please.
Through to Councillor Rintoul, that is correct. I do want to add, as well that there was engagement as part of the transit local area, or the Peninsula Local Area Plan, which did have this as one of the two options. There were stakeholder workshops held. Mary Winspear was invited at that time. Those were done in 2021, and we did receive surveys from 362 people who lived throughout the region at that time. So there was some initial engagement done on the local area transit plan in general, which included this as a potential location for a rapid bus station.
So thank you, through the mayor, the staff, thank you for the clarification. I certainly appreciate the background information on some of the early consultation that had occurred. Mainly I'll be supporting this today on the basis that we've heard from the Mary Winspear Center that they're in favor of it, and that, as was noted by Councillor Duck, we're moving this forward in principle. I don't want to see this initiative lose momentum with BC Transit. I want to ensure that this is a part of their program, but I am certainly supporting this with the complete understanding that between the town and between BC Transit, that consultation with immediate stakeholders will be a part of this ongoing process. I'm not expecting that the early design that was presented to us last week is set in stone, and that there'll be the opportunity through consultation to see that evolve, because I remain concerned for the level of congestion at that location as it relates in particular to traffic approaching Beacon from 7th and Bevan through that corridor. So I'll leave my comments there, but I'm supportive of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I'm very much in support of this in principle. Mostly in principle simply means it gives you a project to actually go forward with the kind of detailed design things, because most of the comments that we would expect coming forward from the community are going to be ones that are things that help you with the design of the facility itself, rather than the kind of things that are make or break. As the Mary Winspear said, they're in support of it, but there's obviously design issues. I was reading an article earlier about the Vancouver Food Bank, where they said every time gas prices go up 10 cents, they get a few more 100 customers. So we already know that housing price and transportation price come from the same packet of people spending money. Usually if you're driven out of being able to be close to your work because housing prices have gone up, you have to move further away, and that's why people have cars. And so if you can, people can pay more to stay in an apartment if they don't have to have a car because they're able to walk to work or take the bus. if you're being driven out and you have to have that car, that means you can't afford more for a house. And so we know that being able to give people a safety net of alternative transportation that will continue getting them to work is something that's going to be very crucial part of a puzzle of creating housing affordability, because a lot of times it's going to be a one or the other choice for people, and we hope they don't end up living in the car because that was the only thing they could afford. So this is a big expense for people in getting that. The other thing is that with transit, because of that effect on people's housing affordability and potentially where that starts coming in with hitting those other pockets like food, I'm worried about spending too much focus on the idea of congestion being a deal breaker, when what congestion means is you might sit at a light for 4 more minutes, 3 more minutes. You might sit further back and think, holy moly, I'm sitting here a long time. But that's what we call an inconvenience compared to the idea of ending up using the food bank because you're dependent on a car and the price of gas went up 10 cents. That's the kind of scale of the importance of making these choices. And because we know that it takes many years to plan for something like this, that there's definitely going to be times when governments are going to have to make the decision to build that safety net and make sure it's in place before it feels like every person thinks they need it, particularly in a town like Sidney, where so many people are wealthy enough that they're not going to see the need for that safety net for much longer than a lot of other people will. And so I understand that the largest, loudest thing we're going to hear from people in Sidney is how important congestion is and convenience of parking. As a government, I want to make sure we keep where the actual importance is in terms of the decisions we're making for the future. And so I know that we're going to hear from people, and I hope that it means that we can get the kind of feedback that means we do tweak it so it doesn't become, something that it is unworkable or unusable as a bus stop. But I just want to make sure that we understand what transit really means to people, or even aside from the climate change commitments we have. So I hope that we can do that as we move forward with this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I left last week's meeting a little bit like, nah. I just didn't feel the presentation for me was stellar. I'm going to put it that way. What I really needed to see from the presenters was how some kind of visual that showed how the vehicle traffic and the bus traffic would work through that neighborhood and through that intersection. And that wasn't there, so I don't have that to go on. So I came here tonight, or starting today, approaching this from, I need a compelling reason as to why this particular location is the location that we should choose for the transit hub. And we do need one. We need one. And so thankfully staff, and I thank them very much, sent all of us an email this afternoon that provided some really good clarification, some really good information. I've listened to my fellow colleagues tonight. And so I was leaning on that for finding a compelling reason, because I didn't get it from that meeting. And so I'm willing to move this forward in principle. I think we do need it, but I do think, as others have said, that there will be refinement through the process. So hopefully we'll land in an area that works for everybody. My biggest concerns is that if we're gonna spend a few $1 million to put this here, we want people to use it. So I want to make sure that the things that didn't really come out of that meeting last week for me, the transfers we need, getting people to the west side to employment, getting people to the west side where they live, having more buses come from the ferry so people aren't standing there and having a bus go by. These are the things will come out in refinement, but those are the things for me that are really important, because if we want people to get out of their cars, we have to provide them a reason to. So it's all good to have this there, and it's all good to invest the money, but it needs to be used. So I trust that it'll work out that way in the end, so I'm willing to move forward with it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. I'll turn to Councillor Novick and then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this. I'm not going to go into all the reasons to support it. I think my colleagues have done quite well in listing all the reasons why this is valuable for the town. I do have two concerns. One is the loss of approximately 35 parking spaces. something that the town can ill afford to lose. I'm not sure that there's an alternative to it, but I think this will simply add to some of the pressures on downtown parking that already exist. And I think Ms. Warner, made the point quite clearly that, with the BC Hydro charging stalls and the loss of these 35 spots, there could be some serious congestion when there's a confluence of events at both Charlie White and Mary Winspear Centre proper. And I'm not sure that we're prepared for that. But at this point, I don't see an alternative. I think our engineering staff may have to look at that a little more carefully in the future. I'm also a bit concerned about the traffic. The loss of that left turn is going to put pressure on the intersection at 5th and Bevan, which is already a busy intersection. And in my mind, I use that intersection several times a day. It may need lights. There may need to be some upgrades for that intersection for traffic to function adequately during peak periods. I don't think that those two concerns are enough to stall the project or to set it aside. However, they are things that I think we as a council are going to have to consider moving forward. I don't think we can ignore them. If we do, it'll be to our own peril. But I still think this should go ahead. There's no question that the need for better public transit in the town is paramount. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. We had a good discussion last week on this, and I appreciate the additional points that members of council have made upon reflection and from the meeting last week. I thought about this in a couple of ways, and one is process. And while we can tell as representatives of the community that the community would want to provide feedback on this project now, the transit had to work with staff on a concept design and prioritize a concept design before we can go to public engagement. And transit, this is a transit project. They are financing the $2.5 million that is in today's dollars. But it is in our community. It affects land use. It affects our downtown community. It affects our largest community use center. So certainly we want input in that. And so I think approval in principle at this stage is appropriate. I was pleased in some ways that the night after the meeting and the next morning reading the Times Colonist there was a really decent article about transit's engagement on the third rapid bus corridor on Mackenzie. And so they've just started the engagement process. They were literally just launching the engagement process. And it's going to be it's a very robust process for that rapid bus line. It was a very robust engagement process that transit held for the West Shore rapid bus line. So there are the precedents of process that BC Transit has used with municipalities in the West Shore with the core, and that they'll have with us. So we certainly appreciate that the residents. At the same time, it's got to be at least the entire 20-some years that I've been living here that residents want improved transit service. They want improved transit service to major locations, whether it's a hospital or the airport or getting to work for employees and getting around the community. And we need a transit hub to do that. So I'm hearing acceptance from all colleagues that we appreciate the need of a transit hub in our community. The second way I was thinking of is I was thinking of, again, from a land use perspective, well, what are these different pieces of land that will now be transit hub? What were they used for before? Well, one was parking, and we have the loss of some 30 parking spaces. I'm not particularly concerned about the loss of 30 parking spaces. We have over 950. The town of Sidney has 950 parking spaces in the downtown. with on-street parking in 1, 2, 3 hour zones, or 1 and 2 hour zones, and then 5 parking lots as 3 hour zones, or the employee parking lot at Mary Winspear that is parking all day. So again, we spoke of it last week, and I think it's important to repeat saying it this evening, that the region, all the municipalities are looking at mode shift. It doesn't mean there's going to be an enormous wave of people moving from their vehicles, single vehicle occupancy, to transit, but there has been mode shift in the origin and destination survey that was done by the CRD this year, a very extensive survey. Transit use is up as a percentage of the trips that people take. And so we need to continue to do things, projects and education and awareness to do that. And this transit hub is going to help provide that opportunity. So I'm not concerned with the parking loss. I'm not concerned with the congestion, because if we don't do anything, the congestion is going to get worse there on its own. And if we can facilitate mode share, some people will start taking different routes. I have changed, my wife and I have changed the routes that we sometimes take in and out of Sidney based on what the traffic is doing at that time of day, or what the ferries are doing, that time of day. So there will be some accommodation, from the public, but congestion, I don't think is a reason to do that. We're actually trying to facilitate some relief to congestion with this project. And the third is, when in thinking of land use, I'm thinking about the Sidney Information Center and about the little parking lot that they have there. And I was involved with the Business Association when that came to be, and that's got to be one of the most underutilized little parking spaces. I think there's only about 8 or 10 parking spaces, but it's a full driveway, through there, and that sort of thing. And I'm only gonna suggest that it be further considered, because I would find it hard to believe that both our staff and transit didn't consider, the use of that space. And there's a significant green space there, and the community does appreciate that. I've had residents say, why can't we have more picnic tables there, and that sort of thing. The landscaping is beautiful there, and I think that's important. It's one of the green spaces in our downtown sort of thing. So I'm not suggesting we take away from the green space, but the one thing that comes to the fore in listening to Denny Warner from MPS this evening is that egress and that direct line being able to go out on 7th to get to the Beacon interchange, or to get to the Beacon Avenue intersection. Because again, through another project where the CRD was considering regional arts facilities, the Mary Winspear Center provided information. They sell tickets. Tickets are sold to their performances in every municipality and electoral area in the CRD. Southern Gulf Islands, Salt Spring, Juan de Fuca, and all 13 municipalities. So we know people are coming to the Mary Winspear. It's a regional performing arts facility, as well as a community center. So I just hope that can possibly be revisited. That I think that would be that'll be the single largest change in terms of not having that direct egress out of the facility through 7th, particularly for the many out of town folks, even North Saanich folks that do attend. So I don't want to start trying to redesign and that sort of thing. There's going to be public engagement, but those are just some of my thoughts with regards to the process and some of the land use in that area at this time. I'll turn to for a second time to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your comments and those of my colleagues and responses from staff. And based on that, I have a better level of comfort moving forward with this in principle. Like Councillor Rentoul, my expectation is that it sounds like there will be some significant engagement after this, and that this isn't necessarily a done deal the way it is. So based on that, I'm happy to add my support to the to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you again to staff. So we are next turning to staff reports, and under 13A, we have the 2023 Town of Sidney Annual Municipal Report. I'll turn to staff for an introduction. Would that be Mr. Hissick? Or Mr. Humble?
I'll present it, Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Thank
Humble.
you, thank you.
We want to give you every
Yeah,
opportunity this last sitting.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, staff are pleased to present to council the town's 2023 annual report. Pursuant to the community charter, the annual report has been advertised through the required notice provisions. This report is assembled through the administration department with information that is provided by the various departments. Included in this important document is information related to the town's audited financial statements. There are organization reports regarding municipal services and operations. There's progress reporting on municipal objectives and initiatives, as well as progress reporting regarding the town's strategic plan. Staff are recommending that the Sidney 2023 annual report be approved as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I would look to a colleague to move the recommendation. Councillor Novak.
I move that the Sidney annual report for 2023 be approved as presented.
We have it moved, and we have it seconded by Councillor Rintoul. Any discussion? Seeing none, I just want to provide an enormous thanks on behalf of council to staff. It's a remarkable report. I enjoy reading this report every year. I mean, we live this work. I mean, I live it on a daily basis, but we all live the work that comes through council and that staff does. But it's just a fantastic report with all sorts of information. And as I did last week or the week before with the CRD annual report, I highly recommend it to residents, particularly new residents, but just residents wanting to check in on what your local government does in the community and that sort of thing. So thank you to all staff. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries unanimous. We are now turning to item 13B, which is an amendment to policy PR-5.6, employee recognition. And I will turn to staff for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I drew the short straw again. So this is a pretty straightforward update to the town's employee recognition policy. The change involves including in the annual recognition of long-term service to the town those employees that have served 30 years or more with the town. Currently, the policy only includes recognition up to 25 years of service. So the recommendation is that the policy be approved as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to staff, to Mr. Humble. One question, but just a comment. Thank you for bringing this forward. As someone who served over 30 years with the same company, it's good that it's being recognized. It's quite an accomplishment for people to stay with one organization for that length of time. And having said that, has there been any consideration given to sort of like the employment climate we live in post-pandemic to recognizing people at 5 years, just because that's becoming even a rare thing?
That's a great question. Not to my knowledge, but it's something that maybe we can take under consideration, or staff can take under consideration, and maybe talk about that in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. Seeing no questions, so I'll look for a mover. Councillor Duck.
Yes, and I also move the recommendation that policy PR-5.6, employee recognition, be approved as amended.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries unanimous. We're next turning to the last item, and that is the monthly building report. We don't require a recommendation to receive it for information. Are there any questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none. We do have our 7 pieces of correspondence, 6 of which received replies from staff. We thank staff for those replies and including them in the agenda. We don't have a motion to go on camera this evening, so I will seek a motion to adjourn. Councillor Duff.
Second.
And seconded by many. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.